I do find that some of the grafted queens that I get that are for like commercially raised queens, I do think that there's a difference in like the quality of the queen, I find, compared to
Yeah.
like particularly my favorite queens always, my favorite colonies are local swarms that I get.
I recently sat down with Emily Bondor of Santa Cruz Bee Company. She talks about how she got into bees and what she's been doing with Santa Cruz Bee Company. So stick around.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I know with reels, like I think it's, I don't know, yeah, 30 seconds or 60
And that's
seconds.
Instagram, right? Reels.
Which is them trying to be TikTok.
Right. Well, everyone's trying to be TikTok. I mean,
Yeah.
TikTok is, their numbers are ridiculous.
But it's funny because I remember like 3 years ago or something, or 5 years ago, the stories on Instagram got really big, and that was because they were trying to be Snapchat. So it's like everyone's just trying to always do the other thing that the other person's doing. Like they're still doing that, and they're still, there's value there or whatever too.
Right. Well, and I'm always
that on Instagram stories is a good way to like continue to engage the followers that you do have. Which like I was doing a lot of stories for a while, and then I kind of stopped just because it's like yet again. I was like, it's just another thing that I constantly have to be doing.
So that worked well for you?
I mean, it didn't necessarily get me new followers, but to some degree, I think it maintains the engagement of the followers that you do have. And then there's a chance that they might comment or like or something. But I know like someone also told me to do reels on Instagram versus just doing like a grid post. Because if you do reels, it like a thing pops up where it's like, this can be shown to other people that aren't your followers. Whereas if you just do like a grid post, it only shows to people that are currently following you. So like if you do a reel, there's like a discover page or something like that on Instagram. And then people can find it. And like, I don't know, like my cousin texted me and she was like, you just came up on Matthew's reels.
Oh,
and
nice.
It's her husband. I don't think he actually follows me, but she's like, oh my God, it's Emily. So I think it, to some degree, like I've found that, but it's funny because like some reels that I post like instantly within like an hour have 100 views or likes or whatever. And then some of them, it's like 3 days later and they have 50.
Well, and I think you got to pay attention to like when you do them and what day.
The
and
day
I'm
and
not,
time does make a difference. Like middle of the day is a good time to do it versus like nighttime.
Right. And there's this bit of a science behind it. And like, I was listening to a lady on, God, whose podcast was it on? It was some business podcast. And she was mentioning how she went from like, some people, they'll say their success story. It's like, oh, I got 100,000 followers in 6 months. And it's like, well, you're doing this very unique niche, like I'm just going to use this horrible example, but like if LeBron James also got on TikTok, he'd probably have 1 million followers in a day, and so there's like already kind of that heavy hitter aspect to some people. Yeah. But this lady was just, I remember what it was. It was a mom coach. So she started her own podcast talking about kind of mom issues or mainly, I guess, maybe parenting issues, but it was mom based. Yeah. Like, I got so mad at my kid, I just wanted to throw him through the window or something, right. To where it's like, these are real emotions that people have experienced. And she started she started on Instagram and she got like 100,000 followers within the 6 months. And what she found worked really good was the reels. They were short. And she just eventually, she said when she was starting, she really wasn't getting attraction because she was just kind of doing what other people were doing. But then she just was like, I'm just going to put this real raw kind of out there emotionally video. And she realized that got a lot of traction. So she started just doing that, but she would tag it on a popular song. And so if you look on the bottom of reels, you could see the song that they used, which whether this works or not, I don't know. She claims it does. But
I've heard that too.
Which is kind of weird to me because I'm like, isn't it the content? But she'll find the ones that are trending that have very low numbers on them. So something that's like 2,000 2,000 reels that are using that video, but it shows the trending arrow pointing up, and those are the only
Mm-hmm.
ones that she'll use. She won't use ones that have like 100,000 or a million because she just claims it's too diluted. And so what my thought was is, well, the algorithm, which is, the great man behind the curtain, or whatever you
Mm-hmm.
want to, computer behind the curtain, and it kind of pushes those videos as a priority because they notice that people are enjoying those songs. So I was going to experiment with that, but
Yeah, no, I've heard that too. And to me, it's, I guess it feels weird to me if I'm like, if I'm using songs that I don't already know or like. But at the
right.
same time, it's
But
sort of,
it's not for
it's
us,
just
right?
random. Yeah, it's really not for us. It's to try to, make there be more visibility and traffic. But yeah, I know it is the game behind trying to gain followers is like it's its own it's its own like skill set and art form aside from knowing how to do video editing or knowing how to actually do the thing that is behind the content you're creating too.
Right,
It's
and
kind
that
of
makes some sense. But like you say, it's like, where do you focus all your attention when you got to be in your bees
yeah,
for at least
exactly.
half the day as well? So,
But what's your history with bees? Like,
so I started probably like most people. My dad and I got a hive.
love it.
My wife and I are on 5 acres. We share 60 acres with neighbors, and it's
Nice.
all of us kind of have the same mindset. We're pretty organic minded people. Um, and so our I'd say probably 40 of the acres are managed forest, and then the rest is just native prairie fields. And so our bees have a really great place to forage. And so we started with a couple hives. My dad got one, I got one. We built this kind of this small apiary in the yard.
On the
And
current property where you are, or
yep, yep,
nice.
yep. And then that just kind of started to grow. And what happened was within the first year, so I originally came from like the building, residential building side of things. And we built houses that were super insulated. And I was as I bought bees, I was learning more about them, and I couldn't quite figure out why this animal or this creature that is alive all winter, why we were putting him in such shitty boxes. And so I was like, well, there's got to be something here that can be done. And so I started just diving down into research. And so I found a bunch of research papers on people studying insulated hives versus uninsulated hives. And I quickly realized that the bees' like natural home, or natural choice, would likely be an oak tree, at least from where we're at. And what is the properties of that tree dwelling once they're in it? And I realized that um, what we are doing to bees now by putting them in 3/4 inch pine boxes. I still have 3/4 inch pine boxes, just as a disclaimer. I also have my own insulated hives, but I quickly realized that there'd probably be a significant benefit for them to be an insulated hive. So we immediately built an insulated hive, threw them in there, and saw that they took off way faster and were nicer, and just everything was better. And so I was like, well, it'd be kind of cool to know what's going on in there without having to go open them up constantly, because I'm hearing people say, oh, you don't want to open up all the time. And so I started searching on the internet. I'm like, there's got to be a hive out there that's insulated, that has monitoring in it. Nope. So I'm like, well, I'll just make it.
Hmm, cool.
So I started Hyperhive, which I don't know if you've done any research on that, but it is a insulated smart beehive. It'll have weight metrics will be tied in with AI, which will use temperature, humidity, sound. We've got a VOC sensor in there that will eventually, over time, as it gathers more and more data, be able to tell you what's going on in the hive with high certainty. So you don't have to go in every single hive when you go to
Yeah.
do.
You can say, oh, this hive's, thinking about
Right.
swarming, or,
Right. And
there.
there's actually a really smart young gal. I think she was out of Missouri. She's working with oh boy, the name. What's the monitoring company out of Wisconsin? Broodminder.
Broodminder, yeah.
Yeah, so she's sounds like she's hooked up with Broodmire, but I think she's only like 19 years old. I forget her name. And she has used sound, only sound, to determine, I think it's 12 metrics within a hive with 90% or higher accuracy, just with
Wow.
one sensor.
Cool.
And so it's similar to like what we were looking at, but that's ultimately what I got it, how I got into it. And then I was like, well, I'd like to better understand the commercial aspect. And so I grew my own yard, and I've operated a couple different land lease agreements or land use agreements that we've got a bunch of hives on, but then we also do host of hives for businesses and residential customers. In fact, Modern Farmer just wrote an article on it. So I was pretty
Nice.
psyched about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's
Cool.
kind of, I got drug in accidentally. How about you? How did you get into beekeeping?
Yeah, sort of by chance. I feel like, not as much anymore, but I feel like a lot of people get into it because it's like, their grandfather, their father, like someone in their family was a beekeeper, and then they kind of like learned from them and continued the hobby. But I don't, even though I'm from a pretty rural area with a lot of farmland and the like, there's no history of like farming in my family, no
Oh,
histories of
really?
beekeepers. Although someone told me recently that like one of my great uncles was a beekeeper or something, but it was not anything that I had any exposure to
It's
as a
in your
young boy.
DNA.
Yeah, it's in somewhere in my DNA. But yeah, I was after college was living and working in the Bay Area in California, where pretty close to where I am now, and doing work, outdoor work. Did some urban forestry work, and then also did some sort of early childhood education type work. Knew that I wanted to do something with education, outdoor education, and particularly kind of like food justice and access to healthy food for disadvantaged youth and kind of that sort of realm. But since I didn't have any experience with actual farming, I had done like a little bit of gardening as a kid, but really, pretty minimal. So I thought, if I want to, I'm trying to do something around, outdoor work and farming and food justice. I should probably know a little bit about farming, just to get my hands dirty and kind of learn that skill set to some degree. So I decided to do a program called WOOFing, which is Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms, which is like farms all over the world offer room and board, and then you go there for some amount of time and you gain different skills. So it could be, some of them are like you go and work on a dairy farm, or you go and work on whatever, some other kind of like food production farm or something like that. So
It was
um,
what was the acronym for that again?
it's WWOOF, Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. Um, I've also heard willing workers on organic farms. I think it's Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. It's like the official acronym. And they have a national, and then they also, I think, do it by country and by state and stuff like that. So originally I was going to go to Italy and work on like a vineyard, but then didn't. And then I thought about going to South
Jeez, I
America.
would have thought you should have ran for
I know. I
that.
mean, that would have been amazing. I was going to go with a girlfriend who speaks Italian, and then she couldn't go. So, anyways, then I was thinking, oh, I'll stay in California. And then I had another friend who was in my work program, and he was like, he was also about to go do woofing, and he was going to go to New Zealand. And he was like, if you're gonna, if you're gonna do a woofing program, because I was thinking about staying in California to do one. He was like, well, if you're going to do woofing, you should at least go somewhere cool like Hawaii. And I was like, I could do that. Like, cause I think there was some kind of barrier where I wasn't going to go international for some reason or another. And I was like, well, technically Hawaii is still in the US, so that would be easy. Um, so yeah, I ended up getting into this little program on this organic permaculture farm on the island of Maui in Hawaii, and it was supposed to be a 3-month long internship. Um, and then I got there, and it was awesome. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I only want to stay for 3 months. This is pretty nice here.
Yeah,
So,
weather's
anyways,
nice
during
too.
that little 3-month period, on the farm. We had some beehives on the farm, and we had a beekeeper that would come and sort of, we helped him build boxes and bee equipment, and then he also like went in the hives with us and taught us a little bit, and kind of we got exposed a little bit to the bees, and of course was enchanted by going in, and then we had all this honeycomb, burr comb in a bowl we had collected, and he was like, here you go guys, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. So obviously always loved honey, who doesn't? But
Right.
yeah, so part of that was in addition to him kind of hosting hives on different farms around the island, he also was starting a business raising queens, and he was like, I'm old, I need young eyes for grafting, and I was like, isn't grafting something you do to fruit trees? Like, I had no clue. So but yeah, started working for him, basically kind of running starter finisher colonies for raising queens and grafting, and this was in
And that was your first experience with bees, was there? Okay.
yeah, was basically raising queens commercially for export back to the US or back to the mainland. um, so within beekeeping, I was kind of finding this niche, and I always loved biology, was like always my favorite subject, and I've always been interested in plants and animals and time outside, and it was I sort of realized, oh, there's this need for a lot of crops need pollination. There's this need for pollinators. That was also, several years after the sort of start of colony collapse. So bees were becoming more part of the kind of public consciousness and zeitgeist around, you know, save the bees, kind of that piece of it. But then specifically raising queens within beekeeping, I was like, this is, I knew that that was something that not a lot of like backyard hobbyist beekeepers were not doing grafting and commercially raising queens. So I thought, okay, this is like a good skill set for me to learn. Yeah, but the interesting thing too was that I was on Maui, and there was no varroa there, so kind of got to see, having no other frame of reference around other pests, or anything like that. We had really bad issues with small hive beetle there.
Oh,
So I
really?
got to see, what slime outs looked like, and kind of dealing with that as a pest. But, we didn't have Varroa. So after I had worked there for several months, um, was kind of, it's also hard to find work on the island. There's like just not a lot of jobs in general, and then there was a few beekeepers on the island, but it was pretty small. So it's kind of hard to like start a business, and just life there is expensive and everything too, and wasn't necessarily planning on being there long term. So after was there in Maui for about a year, um, and then my now husband, who I'd met before moving to Maui, um, he has lived in Santa Cruz for a long time. So I was like, well, Santa Cruz is a really nice place too. So I think I can leave Maui for, for Santa Cruz. So moved back, and while I was in Hawaii, I met this guy named Rob Keller, who owns the Napa Valley Bee Company. So not, Napa's 2.5 hours from Santa Cruz. So, a lot closer than Maui. Coming back, I was like, okay, cool. I'll like, here's a cool guy that I met that's seems like a really great beekeeper. I can kind of get to know him, and maybe he can connect me with someone locally that to work or apprentice with.
In
Um,
Santa Cruz.
in Santa Cruz was what I was thinking, just somewhere in the Bay Area. Kind of started reaching out to a few folks that I was finding on Instagram and different places, kind of like looking at different beekeepers, different, kind of commercial or small scale beekeepers
So at
around the
this
Bay Area.
point, you were kind of thinking, I might want to be doing this bee thing. And you're
Yeah,
just
I
kind of reaching
sort of.
out, figuring out kind of where your niche may be within that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I think I was 25, and beekeeping was just, it sort of fell into my lap, and I just sort of fell in love with it, which I think does happen for some people, with different things in life. But I've also heard a lot of people that get into bees and they're just like, yeah, it just felt right. So, it was something that just I just really enjoyed and found really fascinating, but also it felt like somewhere that I actually could make a difference versus, working in an office or
Uh,
other things.
well, and there's something to be said about being outside in even when it's terribly hot out or well, we're not really out miserably cold, right?
Yeah.
But terribly hot out. At the end of the day, I still always feel good. Like you have to be outside all day.
Yeah. We get to be outside all
You
day.
get to make
I'm
money
not,
doing it.
yeah, I'm not a sedentary person. I've never, the jobs that I had before, I was like, waiting tables or, doing landscaping or, I'm not someone that likes to sit around. I like to be moving and I love to be outside. And so those things really fill my cup. So I was like, yeah, I knew that I didn't want to have a computer based office job type thing. So, um,
And here we are on the computer.
yeah, this is minimal. This
I know,
is,
I'm just joking.
this is a means to an end.
Very
But
true.
yeah. So anyways, when I moved back to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, um, met up with Rob, helped him. He also teaches beekeeping at a Montessori school, so that kind of knowing that he did beekeeping but also was teaching beekeeping, that to me was very appealing because that was, I come from, my mother and my sister and aunt and tons of teachers in my family, and I think that that's something that I've thought about doing, and that even recently I did some. Um, Once I was already beekeeping, was doing for several years garden education at a school. Like we have something called Life Lab, so definitely really enjoy the aspect of getting to work with youth and teaching them outdoor education. So through meeting this guy Rob Keller from the Napa Valley Bee Company, we started. I helped him do this event at the Heirloom Festival. He has like this Airstream trailer with an observation beehive in it, so people can come in and like look at the beehive and see educational stuff. And it was kind of like an exhibit piece. Um, so did that event with him and then went back to Santa Cruz, and then he sent me a text and said, hey, do you want to work for me? And I was like, I live 2.5 hours away. That seems crazy. But I started going up and would basically go up and just stay. I actually stayed in the Airstream trailer with the bees
Nice.
because he had it on his property. And so I would go up and I would, go drive up, and then I would work a day, stay a night, work another day, and then drive back to Santa Cruz. And so for several years, I did that. At first it was once a week, and then I switched to going every other week. And then I switched, after a couple of years, I just went once a month and would stay for 3 or 4 days, but essentially got to really apprentice with him. And he does all sorts of like stationary hive management with, treatment free, sets up small micro apiaries around Napa Valley, and then we'll go and on like a monthly basis or whatever, go and
So
check
were
the
you,
hives.
so were you, were you starting to do your own thing in conjunction with working with?
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
were, okay. So,
So essentially, was in Maui for about a year doing beekeeping there. Moved back, was working with Rob for several months, but it was pretty early on. It's funny with beekeeping, like people will people will find you and contact you, and it might be someone that lives an hour or 2 hours away or something, depending on where you are. And so pretty early on, there was one person that was someone that I actually still work with to this day, who has a kiwi farm in Santa Cruz. She contacted Rob and said, hey, like I'm trying to get bees or find help. And he was like, oh, I have a gal in Santa Cruz, she can help you. And so she was one of the first people. And then my business now has just grown basically from word of mouth. I haven't really had to do any advertising, which is awesome. But yeah, and then just have met several, kind of strategically met several people through connections in Santa Cruz. And then once I had 5 or 10 people I was working with, they each said, oh, my friend Nancy wants bees, and oh, my friend Carly wants bees. And
yes, yes.
so just sort of grew organically that way. But yeah, so essentially from was in Maui 2012, 2013. And then I think it was in 2014 I moved back to the Bay Area. And then from 2014 up until the pandemic started, really, I was going up to Napa, you know, once a week to once every other month, or,
Just
to
to
some,
get them,
it's
help them
spaced
out
out
on
much
busy
more.
days.
Yeah. And I mean, at first it was very much, I was learning and kind of diving head in and kind of getting the educational piece. And then after about a year, I was essentially just still learning, but very much managing Napa Valley Bee Company with Rob. So I was kind of an associate apiarist. So for a long time was working with him. And then especially during the pandemic, wasn't able to stay with him because of obvious reasons. So then, but during, starting in 2014, and then I think in 2015, it was either 2015 or 2016 that I kind of like incorporated Santa Cruz Bee Company. But yeah, I started seeing people in Santa Cruz and helping and doing hive management, I think in 2015, early 2015. And then it's been like 7 years or 8 years.
So when really kind of started doing your own thing, when you kind of cut it down to about once a month helping Rob out, what did you have a like intent in regards to like some, because I noticed on your it appears that you do several different kinds of services, and some of them just kind of come with the territory, right? Like swarm relocation,
Of
like
course, yeah.
you have to advertise and people just find you, they just want the bees out of their house or whatever, or out of their wall. But it seems that you really kind of appeared to have taken like a bit of a mentorship and like teaching aspect to it. What inspired you to do that, and I guess what fuels you to do the mentoring and the teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, since it was such a huge part of my learning and growth and experience within beekeeping, I'm very much, I know for me that I can read something in a book and kind of understand it on a cerebral level of kind of an abstract concept, but with something really hands-on and technical in beekeeping, I find that for me, if I can have someone kind of demonstrate things, that's really helpful. And I've similarly, like throughout all the time, more or less, that I've been managing hives through Santa Cruz Bee Company, I've also been teaching beekeeping classes at the community college,
Oh, cool.
um, that have been very much like started very much lecture based, but have been transitioning more to being much more practical, hands on kind of stuff. And that's mainly based on the feedback that I've gotten from people saying, how do you open a hive? When you lift a box off of a hive, where do you put it? How do you place it? Like all, like you were saying with the
Yeah, those are the
doing the
silly
tutorial
things
video
that
about
like
cleaning the
people,
hive tool. It's like
right?
just seeing someone else doing those things, it makes a huge difference. And the way that you manipulate the frames in the hive and how you move your fingers to not squish bees when you're removing pieces of the hive and frames, and when you're putting boxes back together, and how do you light a smoker, and when do you actually need to use a smoker, and how do you not kill bees when you're working in a hive, and all those little things.
Don't ask me because I'm great at squishing. I hate
That's always
doing
what I
it.
tell people is like the hardest part of beekeeping is not
You
killing
kill.
bees
I know.
because
It's like
there's
you
so
could be in
many
a
of
hive
them and
forever.
they're
Like,
so
okay, get
tiny.
back in there. Come on, I gotta put
Yeah,
a
come on
box
girl,
on
move,
there.
move. Yeah, so but all of those little things, I think with doing something like teaching and mentoring and having that one-on-one time with someone who's experienced, um, just like how you would say, oh, I want to get a surfing lesson, or I want to get a tennis lesson or something like that. It's those little things that someone that does it all the time, these things become like second nature to them. So like for me too, one of the things that I'm now trying to also incorporate and really make a really big part of it is that I don't want to be managing other people's hives for them forever, even if they're with me. So now I'm really I'm trying to tell people like, tell me what you want, what you need on an individual level, because everybody's different. Some people actually just kind of want to see the beekeeping show and want to like watch and are like, that's cool, I'm glad
Right.
to be with you this
Yeah.
one time out of once in a year just to like have FaceTime with you, but I know that like you're taking care of the bees and that's your thing, and I'm grateful to have your services. But then other people, they really want to learn, and they might only have me come to their apiary once or twice a year and say, I want to split my hive, but I'm not really sure how to do it. Walk me through it. Help me figure out how to do this in a way that will be successful. So depending on what people need, like there's a wide variety there. So what I'm trying to get better at is, because it's all very second nature to me, I'll just dive right in and do everything and explain stuff while I'm going. But I want people to get to the point where they're, getting in the hive. And for me, like I've never worn gloves because I find them impossible to work in. So I just don't wear anything on my hands. And a lot of people are like, I see them and they're new and they're trying to wear these like stupid baggy gloves that are all bulky and impossible to work in because like they're
Right.
just so, you can't even get between the frames. Your fingers just get like wedged and then the bees start stinging them. And it's just, yeah. So
Right.
I've been helping people kind of transition to like gloveless beekeeping or, wearing dish gloves or other things or, kind of trying to
Well, I've
help people
heard and I've
gain
noticed a lot of people
competence.
starting to use those neoprene like
Hmm.
disposable gloves because apparently
Yeah.
the bees won't sting them.
I don't really think they can sting through them very well. Better than, because some people wear like the gardening gloves that are the rubber on the one side, but then the backside's just cloth. And so
Yeah.
the bees can see through the backside. So, but I've heard that the dish gloves, because they're like
Ah, the
rubber,
little
they're like
thicker
cloth and
ones.
rubber. They're a
Yeah.
little bit thicker, but they're way thinner than the leather gloves. So, so it basically my kind of goal is to get people to a level where they feel competent and comfortable with the kind of semi-regular maintenance that might need to happen on a beehive. And again, it kind of goes back to like what we were saying about like how often do you get into a hive and how, what do you do? And a lot of it is me helping people to kind of learn how to read the bees too and say, just kind of, you don't need to get in there. Definitely don't get in there every week. Don't even get in there every 2 weeks. Only get in there once a month or less than
Right.
that. And learn how to, monitor and read the hive entrance and feel the weight of the hive and kind of helping people to come up with tools for, what they need. And obviously beekeeping in different microclimates and regions, even within Santa Cruz County, we have a lot of different we have the mountains and then we have coastal areas and there's a lot of different microclimates that bees do really, you know, seasons change and things are, a couple weeks earlier or a month earlier in certain places, depending on, the forested areas and all those things. So it's been really cool for me to get to work in so many microclimates and places around, I have like probably a 50 or 100-mile range that I'll go to depending on where people are. Yeah, so I feel like that also helps to inform me about how to educate people within our local area about kind of what to expect. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I mean, I love teaching. Like that's always been very apparent to me since I started with beekeeping is that and I think a lot of that, is also in thanks to seeing Rob, teaching beekeeping at the Montessori school. He has a big apiary there and they have, they're not in a classroom learning about bees. They're like working in the hives with the
well,
kids. And
and one of the things that I've always noticed with like, wow, my phone just went to my, did you hear it ringing? That
mm-mm.
was very loud. One of the things I've noticed with, or maybe it's, I guess I haven't noticed, but one of the things I struggle with often is, on the mentoring side of things, it's like, at what point do you have to monetize it? Because, there's I want to help you, but I also need, you're going to take half. No matter what happens, at least for me, if I go work in one hive or two hives with somebody and they may only be 10, 15 miles away, it's half the day. You know what I mean? And, at some point you got to kind of pull the reins back a little bit, at least for me. And I was like, well, I have to keep this very limited because my time is precious, like everyone's. And, at what point, and I don't have a solution for this, but it looks like potentially you do, that you provide a program where you're mentoring them through it and charging a fee. Do you see much kickback on that, or do people respond positively, noticing that your time is precious?
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I feel like people are really understanding of mm, kind of the value of my time and expertise. And I've just been always pretty straightforward and transparent with people just about the fact that um, if they want me to, like, I'll to some degree, like, I will have like a free phone call with people, or I can text or email with them a little bit initially. Um, But especially during the pandemic, I kind of realized like, oh, people are like asking me a lot of things are taking up time and I'm maybe not even able to meet with them. So like I should probably and now be like, here's the stuff. And I've, kind of calculate like, okay, I've spent, 30 minutes talking with this person or whatever. I'll just be like, here's my Venmo if you want to donate anything or whatever,
Hmm.
kind of that model for
Yeah.
that sort
Yeah.
of stuff. But usually I'll offer a lot of those things kind of initially just for free because that feels good
Well,
to me
there's
to
some
do that.
research too that says that if you offer up the fee as a willing donation, surprisingly enough, you receive more money than if you were to charge.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So I
But
think
if
that's also, yeah, I think that there's so many different ways to it, but I think, for anytime that I'm going to someone's place, even since the beginning of the business, I've always, said, this is what it's going to cost because my time is valuable kind of thing.
hmm
So but I think it's really hard. And I hear that from so many so many people that are doing beekeeping because a lot of people do it as a hobby and a lot of people enjoy it and want to share it. And so, like, particularly not as much with hive management and mentoring, but with speaking engagements for a lot of educational speaking engagements and stuff. I get requests all the time from schools and community groups or like people doing summer camps or all these different things where they want an educational bee day where they want to have a speaker, bring an observation hive, or bring products from the hive and come and talk about the bees and different stuff. And that also is very time consuming, but it's tricky because a lot of those programs, whether it's a nonprofit or school or whatever, a lot of them don't have funds to pay, or they might
right.
say, oh, we can
Well,
we can
and you
pay you for
probably
an
don't
hour
want
or
to, right? I
something.
mean, like you show
And
up
it
in
feels,
elementary school, it's like, hey, it's $2 a head.
yeah, it's like it feels weird. So I'm trying to, part of what I've been trying to problem solve around recently is trying to figure out some sort of, not necessarily like a sliding scale, but something where I can get to the point where I can offer um, free programming for things like schools and especially like public elementary schools. I worked at one for 3 years. I know that they have absolutely no money. They
Right.
can't afford to pay
Well, teachers are
professional.
buying pencils for God's sakes.
Exactly. So um I've realized that I always feel really guilty asking them for money, but then also a lot of times I have to just turn those things down because I just don't, I have to think about the bottom line, which doesn't
Right.
feel great. But
Well,
you know
especially gas now. I mean, it's like it isn't cheap to hop in your car anymore.
yeah. So that's another thing too, is I do charge travel time and I had to adjust that slightly during this past 6 months because I'm like, it's suddenly a lot more expensive for me to go
Right. Well,
places.
we noticed that with the host of hives because we've got a monthly subscription cost, and
Hmm.
it's like travel is literally probably the most expensive aspect to that, and it's doubled in cost
Yeah.
from a gas standpoint, anyways. What sounds like might actually work well for you, and I don't know if you've explored it, is like a subscription type model for
Hmm.
educating, like having
Yeah.
modules to where you film it, record it once, and then even like these events at schools, it could be kind of a not an ad, but like a introduction to potentially, kids or even parents or teachers that are like, oh, I'd like to do this more. And then just say, well, you could go to Santa Cruz Bee Company and sign up for our subscription and buy, basic beekeeping 101 for $20 or whatever.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of tools out there now that can make some of that stuff actually kind of handy to do. I mean, I would say 5 years ago, it was you had to be very technical to do it.
Yeah.
And now there's quite a few platforms that are a bit plug and play. And depending on how your website's hosted or how it was built, there's likely a solution out there that is plug and play, whether that's integrated directly into the system or not, or it's a third party where you have like a subdomain or something.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that would be great. I've definitely, kind of had that had that thought too. And
It's a lot of work though. I mean, to be honest, like I owned beekeepershub.com, and I've been kind of working on it on the side, and it's like that's another full-time job. So,
Yeah, you have to kind of think about where is your time best
right,
utilized, and yeah,
right,
it's pretty interesting, and just from I didn't go to business school. I don't know that much about running, monetizing or running a successful business, but it's weird to think about. I don't know. It's kind of something that I've had to get over is like I'm doing this because I love bees and I want to help bees and I want to make the world a better place and I want to share
right,
the joy of beekeeping with people, and I also want beekeeping to be accessible to people. So that's been something that's been interesting for me, is trying to figure out, how do I do this successfully and be able to like make a living for myself, but then also do it in a way that feels good, because I don't, it's like you don't want it to be about the money, but also you can't not think about that side of it too. So it's,
right.
you have to kind of balance that. But yeah, I think it's interesting kind of thinking about um doing kind of educational videos or different things that might be, putting a little bit in a lot of different buckets. I think that's how a lot of um, sole proprietor entrepreneurs, or content creators, or different independent people need to do it.
One of the things I noticed though is working on those multiple buckets, and I'm a bit of a victim of this myself, is like dabbling over here, dabbling over there, and nothing ever ends up getting finished. I mean, that like I have more
Also
ideas than
familiar
I
with that.
have time for by 1,000%. And so picking and choosing and then just really honing in on it, that's where I struggle.
Yeah, I feel like I've done well, at least, because it is only me and I haven't figured out a good way to scale the business yet, or a way that feels right to me. One of the challenges with the kind of work that I'm doing is it's so specific that there's not a ton of people doing it in my area. And so I've been able to kind of like make a name for myself locally in this specific kind of work. Um, and I know there's other folks, in surrounding cities around the Bay Area that have had kind of do sort of similar work. And a lot of folks have a hard time scaling or hiring because they hire someone and train them, and then they're like, this person's then
Go
like,
off and do their
okay,
own.
cool, like I've learned what I need to do, like I can make $20 an hour
Yeah,
working for
train
you,
your
whereas
competition.
$80 an hour working for myself. And so
Right.
that's been kind of a barrier in some ways to me training or scaling or growing the business, is
Well, and
because
that's where like honestly, like, I well,
it's hard, because I don't, that feels icky to me. Like I want to be able to share openly and teach and train people, and I
right, but you need to
wonder the other
protect yourself too.
people.
And like I think that how you can do it, and I've thought about this at length a bit. And I think having that back end infrastructure, like, and that infrastructure is leads and management and assets like educational modules. If you have that, that's a lot of work, right? And it takes a lot of time, and you've got your name, right? Like you've grown your company through word of mouth. I mean, you can't just start a company and figuratively open the door and people just come in. That's just not how it works. You have to be spending time on marketing, and marketing could be either money or time in market. And you spent time in market, and people know who you are, and that's good. And like getting your name out there, similar to like what we're doing right now. I'm not saying that there's a ton of people yet, but that's the thing. I mean, I was drawn to you, and so you've obviously got something going on that's positive, and someone that you were to train, just they can't do that
It's
overnight,
true.
you know.
Yeah,
And so I wouldn't be worried about that too much. I mean, obviously you gotta be aware of it, but
for sure. I
and
mean, I
maybe
think
maybe that
that's,
means non-competes. I don't know.
yeah. I think also it's kind of a little bit of me kind of re reframing my thinking around things, and um I feel like that's coming from kind of like a scarcity mindset of there not being enough. And if I kind of shift my thinking to like feeling like, you know, uh, you kind of pay it forward and like do good and good things will come back to you, kind of like being a little bit more kind of open and sharing of your knowledge and your time. I think there's a huge benefit there. And I think if you're kind of leading from a place of like believing that things will work out well, like there's kind
Right.
of something to that.
Right.
Obviously, that's very kind of like,
Well,
you
there's
know,
some measuring that you could do on the front end. I'm not very good at hiring, to be honest, but there's some stuff you can do on the front end to kind of get an idea of who that person is too.
hmm
Because I mean, honestly, there's a very low percentage of the population that takes the dive to do it on their own, right? Because
yeah,
there's a lot of risk involved. You are certainly, you don't make a lot of money right away. I mean, it's a lot of work
yeah,
just to pay the bills, and
yeah.
it's a lot of risk, right? And so you find someone that's um is it risk adverse?
Risk averse,
Yeah, you
probably. Yeah.
find someone that's risk averse and you're probably fine, you know. And so that means having to find like a or having a long questionnaire and interview process that helps identify those. I forget the name of the there is a very popular personality test out there that a lot of businesses use to identify, and they use letters. I think it's like four different
Oh,
letters.
it's probably the Myers-Briggs. It's like an
Myers-Briggs. Yes, that's exactly it.
INFJ.
Yeah. That's a good thing to do too. Like, here, take this Myers-Briggs and just go, these are the only people I'm willing to entertain working with.
Mhm.
And um just, I mean, it's not a guarantee, but at least it's
No, but
something, right?
I think there's definitely something to that because, you know, yeah. And it's always there's always going to be a risk or a gamble there, and then, you know, kind of
Well,
yeah,
I mean, you
it
kind of
takes
step back too. Like, I've always told this to, friends of mine. It's like, as you grow a business until you get to a certain level, but if it's a small business, every time you hire someone, it's almost a step back for the owner because you're now having to pay for them, you're having to support them, and those
mhm,
are funds that you didn't have to do before. However, they're likely taking things off your plate, which
exactly.
allows you
So
then to
yes.
divert to something else. And then as long as you're quick at doing that, you have that figured out, you'll be good.
Yeah, for sure.
So what you know, you were mentioning we're running up on an hour here. You were mentioning that you were doing the queen rearing in well, there's a couple things I still want to talk
Hmm.
about, and
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of them's the queen rearing.
Hmm.
Are you still doing that? Are you
Not
selling queens?
not really. Through Napa Valley Bee Company, my kind of then pivot of education for queen rearing was much more small scale, where we were essentially doing walkaway splits and harvesting queen cells from colonies that were swarming, and finding virgin queens in swarmed colonies and things like that. So it was much more kind of um, small scale hive management, but not running starter finishers and grafting as much. There have been a couple beekeepers within Santa Cruz that are doing that kind of work that I've kind of subbed in and helped with over the years. And I still have a good knowledge basis on essentially how to raise queens commercially. But for me, I've kind of found that there's one local beekeeper that who's a good friend of mine who does raise queens, and so part of me is like, well, Aiden Wing, who owns Wings of Nature Bees in the Santa Cruz Bay area, he's already doing that. So part of it is like me also knowing like that's kind of his thing, and educational piece is kind of my thing, and so we sort of it's
There's
kind
like,
of that like co-opetition
yeah,
of different slightly different things. So part of it is that there's already someone that is raising queens locally, so when people need queens I can say call my friend because then he also raises nukes. So like what I've been doing is kind of like getting some bees from him and then kind of distributing them and then helping those people manage their hives. So that's kind of more been my model recently. That however, I'm still raising queens, but it's not to the level of grafting and doing starter finishers, but more um, when I have swarms or colonies that have done well, I've been trying to like breed off of those colonies every year. So it's just more doing like walkaway splits and things like that.
So, but
And then,
and I noticed you're, and this was kind of one of the other topics I want to talk about was, your I think at your website, is it natural beekeeper or treatment free or both?
treatment free. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and the reason I ask this, I noticed that some people that are natural beekeepers, they tend to dislike grafting because it's not natural.
I do
And
find that some of the grafted queens that I get that are like commercially raised queens, I do think that there's a difference in like the quality of the queen, I find, compared to
yeah,
like particularly my favorite queens always, my favorite colonies are local swarms that I get. If I have a swarm, if I split if I do a split off of a hive that did really well versus getting a swarm, like the swarm almost always performs better. That queen just seems to be stronger.
well, and I've
Um,
noticed the same, and my theory is that and please don't send me hate mail, people. Um, I I just don't think that they care as much, to be honest, because I think they just look at the numbers and they're like, and a bit to the fault of us as buyers, as like really focusing our attention to call it six major queen suppliers in the United States, where all they got to meet numbers, right? And like a lot of things, once you need to meet numbers, sometimes quality slips. And I think that we're in an atmosphere, I'm treatment free as well, and I'm a big proponent of it. And I think that we are in a time where we're going to look back and go, why didn't we listen to those crazy hippies?
right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's
It
just
is
that.
possible. It is
It
possible. A
is,
lot of
and it's
people
happened
just
in other parts of the world, and that's what really drives me bonkers. Is I'm like, I mean, I run a couple Facebook groups that have a lot of people in them, thousands, and the hate that gets expelled on anyone that dares even use the word treatment free is absolutely appalling to me. And
stupid.
it's super stupid. I mean, some people think like, oh, yeah, we advertise on our website VSH Queens, which I'm gonna now after interviewing Kara, I think I'm gonna kind of reevaluate how I phrase VSH because I think VSH is a characteristic that, as I described, you're hitting the target but not the bullseye by focusing on that VSH aspect
Mhm.
of it because we were close, right? And it's what's got us to where we're at right now, which is good. Um, but well, I just kind of lost my train of thought. But the treatment free haters, understand. I just don't understand. Like it just makes no sense to me at all. And I just wish that people would just kind of understand. And some of it I think comes from the people that have been pitching treatment free up until now. There's a bit of a kind of in your face attitude with some of them. And I'm not saying all of them by any means, but the ones that were the tip of the spear, um, kind of was like the we do nothing, we just throw them in a
Mhm.
box and let them survive, which that's what nature does.
Yeah.
So I can't say they're wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that, like as beekeepers, and it's a weird thing because you've got a wild animal. No matter what anyone says, that is a wild animal that doesn't need us to live, but we are trying to manage them in our stuff. And so there's kind of like this cross.
Yeah. Semi domesticated.
Right. Where like you can't compare it to a cow, you can't compare it to a chicken because you leave a cow out in the woods, it's dead. You leave a chicken out in the woods, it's dead.
Yeah.
They can't survive in there. We've domesticated them themselves. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I just think it gets real muddy because of that. And
Yeah. Sam Comfort, who you might know, who's out of Florida, he's a great treatment free beekeeper.
okay.
Um, he one of his things that he says in some of his talks that he gives is we want to be treatment free but not stupid.
Right.
And so
That's a
he
great way to
basically
do it.
talks about
Great way to say
it's
it.
great to be treatment free, but you can't just like totally neglect the bees or ignore them. So it's like, he has like three things that he says with that. And like when you think about treatment free, you have to think about environment, genetics, and management. And like all of those things are really important for the success and survival of your bees. And you have to think about like, you know, you're not keeping bees in a vacuum because there's other bees around you. So that's, both the environment in terms of like food available, but also what other bees are around.
Well,
And
yeah,
then
disease spread. I mean, like,
disease spread might spread, like the kind of argument that people give against treatment free beekeepers is like the mite bombs or like the slobbery dog of like shedding mites to other
well,
colonies, which
and
totally makes sense. And it does happen if you have a colony that gets weakened from mites and they have a good honey crop and then they get robbed from other bees and then those bees go back and spread mites. But even within your own apiary, if you have a lot of colonies, like the mites will kind of pick off the weakest one and then move on to the next colony. So like
well,
I
and
totally understand people thinking that you have to treat, but you also, if you know how to manage properly and what to look for, you can see things coming and prevent as much of that from happening.
right. And I like, have you read much of the work that, oh boy, what's his name? He's out of Pennsylvania? No, New York. It's out of New
Tom,
York.
Thomas Seeley?
Tom Seeley. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I talked to him a couple months ago. I'm hoping to have him on this fall, but he, I've read as much as his work as I possibly could have, and he did some extensive stuff on mite bombs and kind of like the correlation to distance to those hives is super impactful in regards to if a mite bomb is a real thing or not. And I I don't know that this is the exact number, but it was something like 25 meters. Like if it's within 25 meters, it potentially has an impact on the hive near it. Anything beyond that, and it's like a drastic cliff that these mite bombs fall off. And so I had at one point a neighbor call me because he knew I was treatment free. And he accused me of killing all of his bees because he knew I was treatment free. And his hives are like 5 miles from me. And I was like, first off, who are you? I can't believe, like, what kind of kahoobies do you have on you that you can call someone up you barely know and blame me for your
Yeah.
failures? And in the end of the day, there's an argument to be made that because you're treating your hive, you're actually creating a scenario where the mites can thrive and survive until
Get
you treat them.
stronger. Yeah.
Right. And so,
They're they're creating, treatment resistant mites.
oh, right, exactly. Yeah. I've said it in tons of these
Yeah.
podcasts. It's like you're selecting the strongest mite and you're keeping the weakest bees alive.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's not helping anything. And yeah, I mean, I think I say it on my website, and I just very much take the long view with looking at bees, and how many different pests and diseases and you know different parasites and mites and issues have they had over the millennia that they've been alive. Like
Right.
this is not new. Yes, it's this has been exacerbated. Varroa has been spread through the globalized trade and transport of honeybees. Obviously, we know that that's a human caused, or it was sped up
Not
by
naturally,
humans.
it's been accelerated by man for sure.
Exactly. But also, we've observed, if you look back at beekeeping journals from 75 or whatever years ago when they started making bee culture and ABJ, they were like, the wax moth is going to be the end of honeybees, and it's
Right.
like, this story has played out before. And the bees always are able to survive because they're smart and they know how to adapt. And
Right.
if you look at kind of uh like with VSH and with the UBO and all of these things that we're discovering about bees, if we give them time and space, they're able to figure it out on their own. The
Yeah.
part of the issue is us thinking that we as humans know what's best for the bees, which we don't ever know what's, like the
I
bees,
know.
the best bees are the ones that we don't touch. Like,
Right.
so I think to very big part of it, humans think that we can fix all these problems, and that's just not really true. I think the best thing that we could do is, do less in a lot of ways. And, obviously we want to be aware of the fact that there are colonies that are declining and have really, really bad issues with mites. Make sure they don't have a fully wide open entrance. Make sure they're not, 10 feet from another colony or multiple other colonies. Maybe move them to a different location. Or, I mean, I'm not a proponent of euthanizing hives, but, I know some people do that if they have really sick colonies, or, that's kind of, there's different ways to do things that don't involve, and I've also, I tell a lot of the folks that I'm mentoring, if they do have colonies that look like they're severely parasitized, a lot of times at that point people want to use a treatment, and I always have to remind them, these bees are already sick. Using a treatment will kill mites. Using a treatment will not make a virus go away.
Right.
So if they're already sick, it's not really going to do anything. But using a
Right.
treatment, it's not gonna miraculously heal them of all of their ills and make them a healthy colony. If anything, it'll probably kill them faster because they're already in a really weakened immune state, and then you're throwing a bunch of chemicals on them, and then they're like going through an even harder time.
Well,
So
and I'm guilty of saying this as well, but and I kind of struggle saying it from time to time, but the experts sometimes have said there's a time and a place for chemical treatment for varroa specifically, like, right, chalk brood stuff like that. Like, I think that you probably could throw chemicals at them, right, because it's a fungus or whatever disease you're dealing with, right, that potentially needs some help. But from a varroa perspective, and I'm not an expert on that stuff, I feel like I'm becoming an expert on this varroa stuff. And you know I've heard people say, there's a time and place for chemical treatment for varroa, and I've always gone, in my mind, I'm always like, I just regurgitate it, right? Like a lot of things that we learn. But my mind's always gone, don't, I can't put something together where a time and place would be to use it. And the only thing that seemed to kind of make sense was, okay, you have a crashing hive, you need to requeen it because you don't have the qualities of mite resistance within that colony. Maybe then you treat it then, and then you throw a new queen in there, and it's like, do you? It's like that hive is already crashing. There's
seems like
already
a lot of
parasitic
extra work.
mite syndromes in it. It's like, do you just let it go? Do you just
Seems,
euthanize
yeah.
it?
In my brain, I'm like, that sounds like a lot of extra time and work and money that's probably not going to pan out.
Well, and you're putting chemical, and depending on how you feel about chemicals and what chemicals you're treating, you've got, water soluble ones, ones that are not. And do you want those chemicals in your hives? I mean, mine have never seen a chemical, at least that I didn't introduce. They may have grabbed some from their foraging activity, but yeah, so it's a can of worms that I really hope starts gaining a little bit of traction. And I think it's starting to.
I
And,
think so too. I think people are realizing there's more data and research that's coming out, and there's just more, also stories from beekeepers that are successfully doing the treatment-free thing, and you know having having good outcomes. So I think it just also, some of it just takes time. Bees have a pretty short reproductive cycle and a pretty short lifespan, and so you can start to actually see incremental change within years. um, but yeah, I think because of kind of the way that things played out with the introduction of Varroa in the US in the 80s, and then kind of the kind of slow decline in the 90s, and like, up until colony collapse and kind of like the massive die off, there was such a reduction in the gene pool that, those survivor bees could work off of, that there's kind of this genetic bottleneck, and there was a lot of kind of health issues there. And I think slowly through, you know, work like Sue Kobe and Steve Shepard are doing, where they're bringing in, cryo, like cryoplasm, germplasm, frozen drone sperm from the Caucasus and from other places, to try and increase diversity, and some of the instrumental insemination and different kinds of work like that. While it's pretty extreme and very technical, and kind of, that kind of merging of technology with beekeeping, I think if there's a small degree of that to kind of gain traction in reintroducing that increase of genetic diversity and trying to, help by using the science and technology to kind of broaden the, robustness and the, create more hybrid vigor and things like that. Slowly over time, I think we are starting to see um, increases in survival through treatment-free management. But it kind of is like a multi-pronged approach, and it just takes time, um, like anything else. Just you have to be kind of committed to also, knowing that you will lose colonies, but kind of taking that Darwinian approach, like you were saying with Tom Seeley, like really, kind of being really aware of the fact that it is survival of the fittest and you will lose colonies. But ultimately, in the long run, you're going to have healthier bees if you're not coddling the weak bees by treating them with chemicals.
Well, and
It's like
less
you don't really want to
inspections,
keep the
less
weak
time in
ones
the
alive.
hives, less costs with chemicals, like less exposure to you. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read the backs of some of those labels, but like full
Nasty.
ventilators, like I don't want to touch that stuff. And it's like, um,
And the bees don't like it. I mean, you see videos and all the instructions are like, yeah, like you might have like take out your entrance reducers and like you might have a ton of bees like bearding on the front of the hive because they're all trying to escape these like noxious fumes. And it's like
right.
basically fumigation and it's just nasty. So yeah,
Well, and that
I
Kara
wouldn't want that in
is
my house.
right. And it was like throwing like one of those pesticides bombs in your house. I can't believe people even used to do that. But some of the work, Kara's wrapping up some additional research where she's testing a full varroa resistant apiary and then a traditional or a yeah, we'll call it traditional apiary, and intermixing a hive into each one and then measuring to see how their performance is. And she
Hmm.
says the results are quite fascinating, but she wouldn't tell me much more than that. So we're going to have her on again for that. And her research is really stemming around, the effort of people that are raising hygienic bees. What is their impact to the gene pool locally?
Mhm.
It's like I could have, I mean, I've got, I don't know, 60, 70 hives that are all VSH. Well, once again, I hesitate using that word, but we'll use it
But
for
yeah,
now.
I know what you mean.
VSH queens in there. Um, and, I have two beekeepers around me that are within flying distance of my hives. And I've questioned, well, as my queens go off and mate, how many of them are mating with the drones that are in my hives. And I've intentionally selected from four different VSH providers in different parts of the country. So I have that diversity here.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece that people
oh,
need to
super
learn about
important.
too. Yeah. And just
Right.
local bees too. I mean, that's so much a big part of my thing is the more local, the better. But also, it's good to occasionally get, I will sometimes get queens from, friends in other parts of the country because, yeah, you don't want to have it be, too, you start to have issues if there's too much similarity.
And but you should, if I mean, if you're putting so much effort into your hives, I think that you really could get a premium for your queens.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
But once again, something else to do,
Yeah,
right?
totally. I mean, my approach too has been kind of like I usually don't sell bees or sell queens to anyone that I'm not then going to have like a longer term management mentorship relationship with because again it comes back to kind of uh, unfortunately the bottom line, but also making sure that if you have bees that you raised and have cared for, it's hard to it's hard to see them go and not to know that they're like going to
Right.
have some kind of aftercare to help
Right.
them kind of.
Well, and in throwing them in shipping sometimes is scary. I ship them out, a handful of them every week. And even last week I had two die. And it's like, you kind of put in a tricky position. It's like, I don't guarantee anything once it leaves my hands because I cannot guarantee how they're treated. Or if they're sitting in a hot truck, we do it. And like, I won't ship on a Friday or Saturday just to make sure they're not sitting on a Sunday. Um, but yet you feel obligated because someone paid, with shipping $60, or whatever your price is. And so it's like, well, you feel the need to honor that. However, you still got to run a business too, and you can't do that every single time. And so you start to kind of go, well, whose responsibility is it mine to make sure they make it there alive? I don't know. I don't even know if I know the answer to that yet. And I don't want to end up like like a major retailer where it's like you treat everyone like a number on a spreadsheet and go look at their reviews. It shows because of that. Yeah. So well, Emily, we are rolling, wow, an hour and 20 minutes. Do you want to direct anyone to any of your pages and your social media?
Sure. Yeah. So santacruzbeecompany.com is my website, and I've got like a little blog there with other interviews and things that I've done on some other podcasts. And I think there's might be a link to my YouTube channel there, but I think it's also Santa Cruz Bee Company is the YouTube, and then at Santa Cruz Bee Co is my Instagram. I think that's also same for my Facebook, which is more or less the same content that's on my Instagram. Don't have a TikTok.
But everyone needs to subscribe to every single one of those.
Yeah. If you search at Santa Cruz Bee Co, that's me. And I like to share educational content and as much as I can. And just happy to know that there's people out there that are getting exposure to different beekeepers around the country, around the world, and different modalities and ways of managing hives. Because there's, don't believe everything that you read in Beekeeping for Dummies.
Right. I've not read it, so I don't know how much of it is.
I don't actually think I have either, but it's
no,
just
but it's good
to
advice in general. Even no matter what we said, don't believe what we said. Look it up.
Yeah.
But look it up on a page that someone's selling the truth.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep. I'll probably reach out with an email just so I got all your contact information, and I'll add it to all of the show notes. So anyone that wants to check you out, check below in the show notes, and you can find it. So.
Great. Thanks again.
Thanks, Emily.
Great to meet you.
Ain't no storm and ain't no thief. Ain't got time and ain't got sleep, but I feel fine.